In Japan, there are people who determine the sex of baby chickens with 99% accuracy. They're able to do that even though the sex of baby chicks is ostensibly indistinguishable. No scientifically ordained system could even approach such astonishing accuracy. The people who do it intuitively. They simply know which chicks are male and which female. Physical evidence is not required. People training to become chicken sexers learn the trade only by looking over the shoulders of experienced workers who themselves cannot explain how they do it. I had heard about this astonishing business before and was reminded of it in a most interesting article in Psychology Today by Michael A. Gillen titled The Intuitive Edge. He reminds us that anyone who's had a hunch pay off won't be surprised to learn that according to cognitive psychologist Arthur Reber of Brooklyn College, we have an ability to know what to do in complicated situations without being able to explain exactly how we know. This ability is unconscious and enables us to perform enormously complicated tasks, from reading and writing to composing music and inventing scientific theories. Reber's research also indicates, Gillen writes, that when faced with exceptionally subtle tasks, people who feel or intuit their way through them actually have a competitive edge over those who consciously try to think their way through. Mr. Gillen goes on to say that this is not to say that an unconscious effort will always beat out a conscious one, and in actual practice, as Reber has found, a blending of the two modes of learning is still preferable to the use of only one or the other. I'm sure nothing I've said here has taken you by surprise, although you may not have known about those wizard Japanese chicken sexers. Sometime, just for the fun of it, you might like to look at a tray full of newly hatched chicks and see if you can pick out the females. There's nothing whatever to physically distinguish the different sexes. You simply have to know. How many times have you heard yourself or someone else saying, "Darn, I should have followed my hunch"? That hunch, as we call it, is actually much more than that. It's the result of rich, deep, intuitive powers based on millennia of successful adaptation to situations, and it's ready to serve us instantaneously when we need an answer. It explains how we often know something without having any evidence to bolster our intuitive response. Our problems at such times often come from not listening to that inner voice and attempting to intellectually rationalize from apparent data, flimsy or convincing as it may be. We have a racial intelligence, it seems, that lies just beneath the surface of our conscious thinking apparatus that can be of enormous help to us in the fashioning of ideas. Ideas are the most important things on earth. Everything follows ideas. The idea must come first, good or bad, before something happens. We tell our grown children as they leave home to build lives of their own that they'll know what to do when faced with difficult situations. And they will. It'll come from their education, especially the home education, and it'll come from their inner voices. Since we become what we think about takes on new importance. We want to think about ideas that will prove beneficial to our needs and wants and to the needs and wants of others. As William Lyon Phelps, the former president of Yale University, used to say, the most interesting people are the people with the most interesting pictures in their minds. The ideas we hold and which direct the course of our lives are the pictures in our minds, our art gallery, we might say. And our facial appearance after 40, interestingly enough, is usually a reflection of that art gallery. We're told that our faces after 40 are our own responsibility. It's only natural that they will mirror the pictures in our minds. In all the years of their lives, they've failed to put together a gallery of ideas that will reflect good cheer, happiness, and hopeful expectation. I rather imagine that few people realize the importance of ideas in our lives. They're simply everything. And that's why living as a simple reflection of our neighbors and neighborhood isn't necessarily a good idea. It's the ideas we have considered and accepted as worthy of hanging in our mental gallery that determines the kind of persons we are. Listen to this. I slept and dreamt that life was joy. I woke and saw that life was duty. I acted, and behold, duty was joy. Now there's an idea I hold, from which I derive a great deal of inner peace and contentment. No doubt when the great poet Rabindranath Tagore of Calcutta, India, worked that poem out, it was the exposure of an idea that meant a great deal to him. Joy, one of the greatest of life's treasures, comes from fulfilling our duty to those we've chosen to serve. Now, we choose our work. It isn't forced upon us once we're independent adults. Doing it to the very best of our ability should bring us joy. If it doesn't, there's something wrong somewhere, and it's very probably that we're in the wrong work or fail to see our work in the proper light. Are we as prepared as we should be? What do we know? How well have we developed whatever talents and abilities are inherent in us? If we don't see opportunity in our work, it's in our vision. We're not looking deeply enough or creatively enough. And so we fail to see all the opportunities for expression available in our present work. Do we belong to the group that thinks education comes naturally, just from being alive? Do we think the education we have is good enough to stretch over a lifetime? What are we doing about it? Are we sponges soaking up knowledge on every side? For many, a diploma or college degree is like a vaccination. In fact, it's called the vaccination theory of education. These people believe that once the diploma or degree's in hand, education for them is over. A college president reported that as he walked toward the podium on commencement day, he overheard a senior saying to another, "Thank God it's over. I'll never open another book as long as I live." He said they were the saddest words he ever heard. Somehow the idea of education had not been sold to that young man, nor did he know the meaning, strangely enough, of the word commencement. Education is a lifelong process, and should end only when we do, and commencement means beginning, not end. Beginning of independence, yes, but also the beginning of the enriching education that will hang the pictures in our minds and determine what we become as persons. Ideas, the great ideas that move us to be better and greater than we now are the deep anchors that will hold us steadfastly in place when the great storms of life crash around us. They're the anchors that prevent our being intimidated or diverted from our path by expediency or fad or shallow opportunity. And they provide us with a set of sensors that can pick up the dishonest and the phony. Getting the cheap and shoddy, the quick buck past a person conditioned by such ideas is like trying to sneak a sunrise by a rooster. Such great ideas provide a security system for us without disturbing our sense of humor. In fact, our sense of humor is greatly enriched by such ideas, and smiling and laughter become important parts of our days. Now, we're by no means immune to mistakes, but understand that they're a natural part of growth and reaching into the unknown future. And are the ideas we hold in concert with our goals? They must be if our goals are to be successfully achieved. What is an idea? We say, "I have an idea." What is that? It's surely more than a neurochemical response, although it's that too. An idea is the bringing together of known increments to provide a result. Let's go to the beach, someone says. Without a moment's hesitation, we take the known beach factor, add it to existing transportation facilities, the proper clothing, possibly a picnic lunch, and suggest the resulting idea to those we're with at the time. It all happens instantaneously, although all sorts of interconnections are going on in our brains. The greater our general information, the more combinations we can put together, and the greater the reach of our possibility thinking, as Dr. Robert Schuller calls it. That's why young people should think twice before complaining about school courses they'll never use as adults. All information of a positive kind has value when we're formulating ideas. When we set an important goal for ourselves, we present to our mind a problem to be solved, a challenge to be successfully fulfilled. Instantly, far down in the labyrinthine interstices of its vast potential, the mind goes to work to find the information we need to turn that idea into reality. The idea of getting an automobile becomes a true automobile we can drive and wash on a warm Sunday afternoon. Perhaps our path from inception of the idea to the time we get into the automobile, turn on the key, and drive away is rather tortuous, even circular, leading first here and then there. More often than not, we get in our own way by doubting the suggestions that filter into our consciousness, only to discover later that they would have been marvelous shortcuts and simplifications of the process if we had only heeded them. But eventually, the idea, the invisible idea, becomes sheet steel and glass and upholstery and rubber, and from time to time, a pain in the neck as well. The idea has become real in our life, even if it takes 3 years to pay for it. Everything we obtain during our lifetimes comes to us as a result of that system. Often it consists of nothing more than a trip to the grocery store, or a telephone call, or a command to a teenager, followed by the rationalization of the command, and or the additional idea of offering some sort of reward for following through on the idea. Idea followed by fulfillment. And as our ideas progress upward in degree, cost, and complication, it's still the same process that will result in fulfillment, or be frightened off by timidity, rationalization, or, on occasion, just plain good common sense. Sometimes, as we toy or tinker with a delicious idea, our thinking process is flooded by other ideas indicating that that particular delicious idea will have to be postponed for a year or two, or maybe 5 years, even more. Our thinking process tells us, yes, it tells us, that we've made the kind of quantum leap that's out of place if we're to stick to our present hierarchy of plans and ideas. That's why a written list is a good idea. Not that we can't modify that list from time to time. In fact, as we learn how readily such a system brings us fulfillment of our goals, it's not at all unusual to upgrade our list to include levels we may not at first have thought were in the ballpark for us. Millions of people use this process without giving it a second thought, without understanding the process at all. A system, once understood and tested, can be applied to whatever we can seriously consider as goal material. All we need to do is leave it to the system. We don't have to fully understand the system in order to use it. The more we try to rationalize and understand every aspect of the working process, the more we tend to get in our own way and limit our potential. It works. Leave it at that. Yes, we become what we think about, but the thinking is up to us, and the degree to which people regularly underestimate their capacity for accomplishment is immeasurable. We think nothing of the accomplishments of others. That is, what others do we take in stride. But when it comes to setting goals for ourselves, we tend to play things outrageously safe, and thus remain within limits embarrassingly small. Especially if there's some sort of maintenance program in effect. That is, if we have a job, though its real demands upon us are minimal, we'll usually shut down any other efforts to prepare ourselves for, number 1, a much better, more interesting kind of work, 2, any sudden emergency that might develop. I remember watching a television news program in which laid-off workers of a closed Navy yard were being interviewed. The announcer asked, "What are you men going to do now that the Navy yard has closed down?" The man nearest to him said, "Well, I guess we'll just have to wait for it to reopen again." Another man said, "I've worked in this Navy Yard for 25 years. I don't know anything else." In 25 years, a person could learn to do heart transplants in his spare time. What were all these people doing with the 16 hours a day they were not working? What about weekends and vacations? Take a pen and paper and work out the number of hours the average working person is actually on the job during a typical year. Then subtract it from the rest of his or her waking time. If an hour a day were devoted to learning, to anything of a valuable nature, the ending of a job would be an incidental thing or an actual benefit. And how about think time? The family provider should have emergency plans A, B, and C, at least A. Just as a platoon leader in combat must ask himself, what if the enemy attacks at night? From the rear, on Sunday morning during breakfast. The family provider should ask, and work out on that legal pad, what do we do if the company I work for goes out of business or lets me go for any reason? And in the meantime, how about that educational program in my main field of interest? During the industrial shakeout of the early 80s, we heard this comment again and again. I worked for that company for 30 years, and now I'm out, just like that. To hear them talking, one might think they'd made a personal sacrifice for the welfare of the company they worked for. They say nothing about the fact that the company paid them for their time at the job and gave them the wherewithal to become anything they might set their hearts upon becoming. It was a fair arrangement. They were not kidnapped and pressed into servitude. They applied for their jobs and were accepted and were paid for the level of work they performed. There was no agreement to provide them with work until they were too old and infirm to continue. Why didn't they take the possibility of a layoff into consideration and prepare for such an emergency? John and Elsie did. When John was laid off, he and Elsie sold their home in Ohio and moved to Florida, where they retired in the sunshine. If he'd been laid off years sooner, they had their little real estate refurbishing business on the side they could have turned to full-time. If they had, they would have gotten rich. The trouble with John and Elsie was that they, like so many of us, underestimated what they could do with the time he was devoting to his job at the steel mill. The job and the regular weekly paycheck was something such people just don't voluntarily give up very often. But such men had father or mother figures on whom they depended for safety as well as survival. One was the union, the other was the company. The company was so big, with such big smokestacks, and employed so many people and made so much steel or whatever. Well, it had been there forever, and it would remain, and all they had to do was show up, do whatever was necessary to keep the job, and then go home again. Why did no one talk to these people about change? How do such people remain isolated from important information? Keep reading like that and you'll ruin your eyes, I used to hear my father say. Reading doesn't hurt the eyes, it's good for them, and especially good for what's lurking just behind them. But of course all that's gradually changing. Each year, more people move into the group that thinks. Ideas are the most important things on Earth, and each of us has his or her own idea factory. It comes with standard equipment at birth, the big brain of the Homo sapiens, the single surviving member of the genus Homo. The baby is born, and we hold in our hands a miraculous living creature whose potential is unknown. What will enter that astonishing brain? And from those ingredients, what kind of life will this child fashion? It's too bad that thinking is not a required course in the public schools. Not remembering, which is what most schoolwork is about, but thinking 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, right into the higher realms of university education. It's the highest function of which the human being is capable, and it is not taught in our nation's schools. Thinking is taken for granted. What every working person should receive upon finishing the training program offered by his employer is a tape cassette program. The program might be called Your Life and Your Work. In it would be found much of the material we're dealing with here, plus such things as recommended savings plans, emergency planning, and simple aptitude tests designed to help the person find the main area of his or her inherent competence. There is a book entitled Know Your Own Mind by James Green and David Lewis, published by Ross & Associates, that contains 9 tests that tell the reader what he or she does best. As it says on the dust jacket, in the book you will learn from only 9 quick-to-do exercises what kind of thinking, inductive, deductive, and so forth, you do easily, and how you can use that skill to enrich and reroute your life. How to determine your degree of creativity and maximize it to bring more useful ideas into your life. How to assess your ability to interact with others, and how to broaden those skills to reach more people. How to determine what's easiest for you to learn. How to turn what you find out about yourself in this speedy book to best advantage in your personal life and career, where you'll be happiest, and what you'll do best, and much more. The thing is, all of this stuff is fascinating to the person and opens up all sorts of interesting windows of opportunity. Options, options, options. The very things we need if we're to make the kinds of plans that will maximize, at least to some degree, what we are and what we can do. And this cassette program would have a section headed, "You Have Lost Your Job." And the section would deal with the subject, what can you do that the community wants or needs? The community being the entire United States and the free world. A good friend of mine, Derm Barrett of Ontario, Canada, a consultant on such subjects as time management, devoted 800 hours to learning Spanish so thoroughly that he now holds business seminars in numerous Latin American countries. It opened up a whole new world of interest and challenge and opportunity for him. 800 hours, about the same time most working people devote to the job in just 20 weeks. Learning the Spanish language means learning, or beginning to learn, about an infinitely rich and fascinating culture. When Derm Barrett explained over the telephone how he had taken on the job of learning Spanish using his own principles of time management and goal setting, and how rewarding his experiences are, I could feel his excitement and enthusiasm. His options had doubled, and how foreigners love us when we speak to them in their native tongue. Losing a job is often the best thing that can happen to a person. Lacking the energy, imagination, or incentive to look farther afield for bigger and better opportunities when employed, being suddenly unemployed often does the job for us. After the initial shock and period of depression, we often find ourselves in work much more to our liking and with far more opportunity for advancement than ever afforded by the old job. Surveys of men and women of singular success have shown that their success hinged directly on the jobs they had left behind. Whether they'd quit voluntarily or been fired made no difference. Practically all of the top people in our corporation were formerly employed by other companies. That they are delighted with their present work proves my point. They're in work far more interesting and earning more in the way of rewards than ever before in their lives. There's an excellent theory in business that we should not concentrate our thinking on the things that are going badly or in need of change, but rather on those things that are going best and producing the most revenue. That's where our thinking can have the greatest return. In other words, don't wait until a crisis to think about something. Instead, find ways of improving and upgrading it while it's humming along at its best. And the same kind of thinking works best with us. Don't wait until you've lost a job to start thinking about possible alternatives. Think about them when all is going well and you're under no pressure nor suffering from a loss of self-esteem. So you get out your faithful yellow legal pad, and at the top of the page you write, "I need better, more interesting, more rewarding work." Under that you might first ask the question, is it to be found with my present company? What can I do for my present company that will make a more important contribution than the work I'm presently doing? Another question might go, if I had my druthers, what would I rather do for a living than anything else in the world? And here we can make a list to later number in the proper order of importance. After each idea we might ask, am I now prepared to handle such work? And what will it take to prepare me for such work? Another question might go, what do I know how to do that will best serve the people of this community, or this state, or this country, or the whole world? Followed by another list. As we doodle with such ideas, more ideas will come to us. Each new idea spawns new ideas in turn, as a fish spawns eggs, and each of the eggs spawns further ideas. Now we're thinking. Now we're using the equipment we were born to use and putting to work our most valuable possession. Never think in this way without a pen and paper, preferably that yellow pad. Write page after page if you can, as long as the ideas pour out. For some, the ideas will come as a spring torrent. For others, they'll come very slowly and painfully as the process of thinking is explored. But as you force yourself to continue, and thinking, remember, is hard work, as you force yourself to continue, you'll find the ideas coming easier and better. Don't stop when you get your first exciting idea. Write it down, by all means, underscore it, draw a star beside it or a circle around it. Then press on for new and better ideas, and you'll find them coming. Work on this in your spare time. Early in the morning is best for me, for days and weeks, until you've worked out at the very least Plan A. Then try for Plan B. Talk the ideas over with your wife or husband, and get his or her thinking as well. Soon you'll find yourselves laughing, delighted as children with your newfound adventures and exciting options. Ideas like that can provide us with autonomy. Ideas can give us freedom. Good ideas are wondrous, delightful, magical things. They explain why people often earn vastly greater incomes after retirement than they ever did on the job that they so assiduously hung on to for 35 or 40 years. With the pension to provide a safe base below which they know they can't fall, they find they have the confidence to pursue those ends and ideas they lacked the confidence and courage to pursue when they were working. That's fine. There's nothing written in marble about when we do what we ought to do. Any time will do. But often we hear such people say, I should have done this 30 years ago. My God, think where I could have been today. And think of the fun we would have had. The fact is, there's no such thing as security as long as we're alive. Security may only be found at both ends of life, before and after, not during. If we're looking for security during our lifetimes, we're looking for something that simply cannot be guaranteed. Insecurity is our natural state. It's not the chimera, the fire-breathing, multi-legged and clawed monstrosity we think it is. Insecurity is autonomy and gives us the options we need for interest and challenge in our lives. It doesn't hurt to have 6 months or a year's income tucked away someplace. That also gives us freedom and autonomy. It gives us time to make a change. A good idea is an idea that results in a change that is beneficial. And good ideas come in all shapes and sizes. One Sunday morning, a man awakened at 8 o'clock, found himself wide awake, and got up. He put on a pot of coffee, took a shower, shaved, splashed on his best aftershave lotion. He then returned to the kitchen, had a cup of coffee and a glass of orange juice. At 10 o'clock, he crawled back into bed and hugged his wife. Later, over her own coffee and orange juice, she told him it was the nicest Sunday morning she could remember. Then, to prove he wasn't the only one who could smash a precedent on a Sunday, she checked the television schedule and turned on the football game for him. Later, he was served a delicious lunch on a TV table. The idea of showering, shaving, and later going back to bed and hugging his wife on a Sunday morning proved to be one of his best ideas and soon became something of a Sunday tradition. A good idea means positive change. And a great money-making good idea needn't come up with anything radically new. There's a larger success in everything that is successful already through good ideas. If there's a modest business in town that's earning a profit for its owner, it can be improved to the point of earning a much larger profit. If there's a dumb, out-of-date motel in your area that's still getting enough business to earn a profit, why not turn it into a super wonderful motel and earn a bigger profit, or build a super wonderful motel across the street from it? Offer so many wonderful benefits nobody will ever think of stopping anywhere else. And once it's about as successful as it can be, start a program of remodeling the rooms, one by one, so that the place is in an unending state of renewal, like the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco. Don't ever say, I'd like to get to the point where I can start taking things easy. Certainly you can arrange for the hard work to be done by others, but you want to keep thinking and planning for the future. Once a person runs out of anything interesting to do, he starts the long downward slide. He begins to fall apart. Things start going wrong. After you die, you can take it easy. Talk about sleep. The people who live longest are those people who never run out of something to do. They're farmers who have new crops to plant and harvest, fresh cows to milk, and 100 other chores that demand attention. They're teachers who have a new class every year, or writers who get through writing on one subject and are soon off on another. And they're people who never run out of ideas. When they come to the end of their lives, they're caught up in full stride like a suddenly broken motion picture film. We learn in reading Ortega that we are the only creatures on the planet who are born into a natural state of disorientation with our world. All other creatures are at home in their new world, controlled entirely by instinct and reacting automatically to whatever stimuli affects them. They never have to ask, "What shall I do?" Why was this pre-planned state denied us? Because we're the only creatures on the planet with the power to create our own worlds within the world in which we find ourselves. An awesome power indeed. That's why ideas are the greatest things on earth, for it is ideas that shape our lives. Unfortunately, with all too many of us, it's the lack of great ideas that shape our lives by their absence. A poet once wrote, "Blessed is the man who has found his work." A great idea indeed, for the man or woman who has found an unending vein of interest to explore. The future represents a happy prospect. Another great idea is that such work exists for each of us. If we've not yet found it, we can do no better than to continue our explorations until we do find it. Another great idea. Our rewards, all the years of our lives, will be in proportion to our service. We are here, we live, in order to serve one another.